All right, my name is Allan.
I'm Frank.
And this is Wrapped Up, a Laveau's MMA and combat sports podcast.
So today we've got a slightly different show because in the past week there was no UFC card. So what we're going to do is run over a pretty memorable historic fight in Francis Ngannou versus Alistar Overeem, and then we're going to give a little preview of the upcoming fights on UFC 310 because there are three really, really huge fights, two with some major title implications, and a title fight between Alexandre Pantoja and Kai Asakura. Just a quick historical note over the Ngannou versus Overeem fight, because that happened 7 years ago yesterday, I believe.
Yep. December 2nd, 2017, the then number 1 contender, Alistar Overeem, fought the then number 4 contender, Francis Ngannou, and it ended in a first-round knockout under 4 minutes. Absolutely one of the craziest knockouts of the time. I think it was knockout of the year for sure.
Oh, for sure. It was knockout of the year. And I mean, aside from the nasty follow-up shot, Ngannou literally lifted Alistar Overeem off his feet. Alistar was leaned over the other direction and got flung. Alistar was leaned over to his right, and Ngannou lifted him off his feet and flung him the other direction with that punch.
The head movement from the punch from Overeem looked almost like a Rock'em Sock'em robot. Like, the way that his head got launched from the punch was so explosive and just showed the level of power that then contender Ngannou had. That was the fight to put him on the map.
It's amazing that Alistar didn't have a major whiplash injury from that one. I think a moment in that fight that people have slept on was the grappling engagement, because Alistar very clearly came into that fight with a game plan. He wanted to test Ngannou's wrestling. He wanted to push him up against the cage and bully him with his famous knees that are so brutal that K1 had to change their rules. And Ngannou turned him around like nothing. And this was the first time that we kind of saw the elements that would lead to what we see now in Ngannou as an MMA fighter who, against Ciryl Gane and in his most recent fight in PFL, showed that he has incredible strength and has developed very good wrestling. But you could see this moment where Alistar Overeem fought Brock Lesnar. He's fought the biggest of the big guys, and he had this moment when he got turned around that you could see he was confused. Alistar had never experienced something like that before. He didn't understand what was happening. And that is so significant. That tells you how strong Ngannou is and was. And I think that's also, for me, I look at that as the moment that Alistar really lost the fight. Obviously, the knockout is when he lost the fight. But his game plan in one instant went out the window. And you could see on his face, clearly written, he completely miscalculated it, and then basically in the next engagement on the feet, he got his head knocked off.
As Alistar Overeem is falling over, the ref is right next to it, about to jump in, but Ngannou's already charging up his, the follow-up shot. He saw that. He definitely waited for Ngannou to stop, at least for Ngannou to hit him with it, and then jumped in to make sure they didn't absorb any more shots. But to be honest, I wouldn't blame that ref. That was a hungry Ngannou before he won the belt. That was one of the scariest moments I think I've ever seen in a fight.
So that goes down as, one of the great fights, one of the great knockouts
one of the
of
best
all time.
ever.
Let's move on to UFC 310. We've got 3 huge fights. I think what we'll do is start at the bottom and move up the card. Mm-hmm. So to start off with, we have a heavyweight contender fight. Number 2 fighting number 3 in Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov. And I'm very interested in this fight, and let's be real here. Basically, whoever wins this fight is going to be next in line to fight Tom Aspinall. I have no illusions about John Jones actually fighting Tom. Whoever wins this fight should be the next one to challenge for the rightful title.
I personally think that this one is going to go in the way of a finish, whether it be a knockout or a submission. The reasoning behind this is because, well, Ciryl Gane, of course, has explosive power, and with Ciryl Gane, his 2 losses are pretty telling of his main issue being grappling. You know, he gets basically out-wrestled by Ngannou for 5 rounds, and it goes into a decision. Really shows his weakness there. And almost instantly submitted by John Jones, like in the first round. It's kind of telling that he has a problem with the ground game. I can't imagine this fight going to a decision. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're very likely going to get a finish. I think the odds, at least for Gane, might be a little bit juiced, as he's currently a 345 favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
That's wow.
But I think there are concerns I have for both of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Ciryl, I think, is much more likely to win it on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you mentioned about the power. He actually, for quite a while in his career, got a lot of criticism as being pillow-fisted. And then he had a couple more of his more recent fights, like his absolute brutalization of Tai Tuivasa, where it's like he heard the criticism and corrected and has started smashing folks. But even on the feet, there are some concerns, like something you specifically saw in the Tai Tuivasa fight was Gane has this way of trying to escape by circling around the cage when he gets put in a bad spot. And he does this leading with his head, hands down, chin up in the air, and that's how Tai caught him and almost put him out. The thing to remember is that Alexander Volkov is one of the longest reach fighters that he has fought, has a very long punching range, has an extremely long kicking range, and has used it effectively against guys like Derek Lewis. But the concern with Volkov is that he just sometimes is very passive on the feet. You know, to reference the Derek Lewis fight, he had times where he was just absolutely beating Derek down, and then he just stands there and lets Derek Lewis, the knockout king of the UFC, just crack him. And so if he is not completely active, moving forward and making sure to make Gane pay for those mistakes that Gane makes and those escapes outside on the outside of the cage, I think there's a good chance that Gane puts him away. The question mark in this fight is the grappling, because Alexander Volkov has shown solid wrestling and excellent grappling. He has a number of submissions on his record, and as you mentioned, Francis Ngannou wrote the book on how to beat Ciryl Gane. Ciryl has effectively no wrestling or grappling ability whatsoever. With Volkov being so long, he has a good chance to be able to close the distance, take it down, and if that happens, you're either going to see Ciryl just get run through and I think very possibly a submission, or he's just going to have to go into survival mode and basically try to stall the round out, because there's almost no chance of Ciryl actually being able to get back to his feet.
The next fight being Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Gary. This one is also a title implication fight. Both of these guys are basically waiting for their chance to fight current champ Belal Muhammad. Rakhmonov still wanted to fight. Ian Gary was available. They decided, you know what, let's settle this. Let's try and get somebody's out of here. And honestly, this is looking pretty Shavkat favorable. The only way I can see Ian Gary winning this is either by clipping Shavkat or a decision. But that's a very low chance of happening. I think that Shavkat is 30 years old. Ian's 27. Ian can definitely bounce back from this and then have another chance of to fight for the title. But I think currently this is Shavkat's time. He's explosive on the feet. He's explosive on the ground. He is favorable in basically every position that he's in. And if it comes to it, I think it would be in the hands of Shavkat.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely heavily favor Shavkat in this fight. To really boil it down, Shavkat has more ways to win this fight. He can win it on the feet. He can win it in the clinch. He can win it on the ground. I know that's an extreme simplification of it, but it's a major factor. To win this fight, Gary's basically going to have to keep the fight at the end of his range, not letting Shavkat close the distance whatsoever. And his path to victory would basically be, like you said, either outpointing him or catching Shavkat and knocking him out on Shavkat entering or exiting range.
Mm-hmm.
But the concern with that is that Shavkat has shown a good ability in striking. I think defensively he could be a little weak, but also Ian Gary has not shown good striking defense whatsoever. And then combine that with the fact that we've seen Gary get wobbled by fighters who are not close to the caliber of Shavkat. And so you combine a not great chin with not great striking defense, and definitely the B side as far as the wrestling and grappling goes. I think a lot of factors are favoring Shavkat. I would favor him to, as long as he can get within punching range, whether he closes the distance, clinches, takedown, gets a takedown, club and sub, knocks Gary out on the feet, I very heavily favor him.
This is definitely going to be one of the fights that I am absolutely going to watch. This is going to be a great one.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk lately with this fight, too, about, like, sparring footage. I don't put much stock into that, you know.
Sparring is a different breed. It's a different mentality, I think.
Exactly. It's a different world. You're in there to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it says that much. People will win rounds. People will lose rounds. But, again, at the end of the day, Shavkat has more ways to win the fight. I think he is overall the better and more complete MMA fighter. Mm-hmm. So, barring a lucky punch, which could happen, or a lucky kick, because Gary certainly does have a lot of power,
mm-hmm.
And has shown excellent straight punches and excellent kicks. But outside of kind of getting lucky and landing one of those, I think Shavkat by whatever he wants.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now it's the main event, the title fight between Kai Asakura and Alexandre Pantoja. I just want to, before I let you go off, I just want to say that this one is a lot more competitive than what people are thinking. He is for sure a valid contender for the belt currently, and I think it's going to be a really great fight.
Yeah, when you look at... So, this is definitely an exciting fight as someone who... I will not go out of my way to watch every UFC card. Mm-hmm. I will always drop what I'm doing and watch every Rizin card, as I encourage everyone to, because I think Rizin, at this point, puts on a better show.
Mm.
It's very exciting to see Asakura coming into the UFC. I think one of the big concerns, and part of why he's such a heavy underdog, is that this is certainly a jump up in competition.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't want to do too much MMA math with it, but there is some interesting history there. They both fought Hiromitsu Ogikubo. For you Rizin fans out there familiar with him, for those who aren't, he's on the shorter side, very stocky, an excellent wrestler, like a ferocious wrestler with very good knockout power. Pantoja actually lost to Ogikubo in The Ultimate Fighter, mm-hmm. on lost by decision. Asakura more recently kind of dismantled him in Rizin. The other thing to look at is that while he hasn't been fighting UFC caliber competition, Asakura's last fight, he went out there and took the Bellator flyweight champion, mm-hmm. in Juan Archuleta, who had been, I wouldn't call his fights usually the most exciting, but he has a very good nullifying game. He's very good at being controlling on the feet and very good at having a neutralizing grappling style. And Asakura made him look like he had no business being in the ring with him. And that, to me, speaks to the level that Asakura is at. The other thing to look at is that Pantoja doesn't have a lot of knockouts. Most of the ways Kai Asakura has lost his fights have been by knockout. Like, famously, Kyoji Horiguchi did knock him out, but Horiguchi is very small, one of the fastest fighters in modern MMA, and has a long history of using speed and power to just nuke people on the feet. Pantoja doesn't have that, and I think that's going to be a problem, because he's going to need to be able to either out-wrestle Asakura, which he could, potentially, or give Asakura something to worry about and respect on the feet, and that second one, certainly, I don't see happening. Ultimately, I think I still favor Pantoja a little bit, but I think having the odds be like a 2-1 underdog, almost 3-1 favorite for Pantoja, I think is a bit excessive, to say the least. So this has been episode 3 of Wrapped Up, the De Anza College Combat Sports and MMA podcast. Wrapped Up is a Laveau's News production, and all equipment and facilities used to record this have been provided by Laveau's through De Anza College.
All right, guys, have a good one.